Hi there and welcome to the channel and to this my birthday book haul. Now birthdays come but once a year, and when they do, they are a great excuse for buying more books, and that's just what I did. I went out into Taipei City, toured the used bookstores and came home with a backpack full to bursting with amazing books, and in this video I will share them with you. That's the plan, at least. So without further ado, let's begin, and we start where it all began. Western literature, that is, with the purchase of yet another translation of the Iliad. Now, the reason I buy every translation I can lay my hands on is because they're great to use when working with undergraduates, introducing them to the art of translation, helping them appreciate just how much one translation may differ from another, even if it's just the basic choice of whether to use verse or prose when translating. Now, Richman Lattimore uses verse, and I find very little variation in the rather long line he selects, and it doesn't quite work. Not to my taste. I prefer the verse translation of Robert Fitzgerald. This is the one with which I'm the most familiar. However, reading Chapman's Homer alerted me to the fact that Fitzgerald omits a lot of material that is in the original, so you do have to bear that in mind. Sometimes it's worth going back and reading the same episode in Chapman's Homer. But of the modern translations, I think this is a very good one. The gods were seated near to Zeus in council, upon a golden floor. Graciously Hebe served them nectar, as with cups of gold they toasted one another, looking down toward the stronghold of Ilion. Now, I know from reading the same passage in Richman Lattimore, he spends about double the number of lines introducing this scene. Fitzgerald not only omits a considerable amount of the original, but is also very economical in the way he produces his translation. So yes, this is a great read. Now I have two here in Penguin Classics, and these are by the same translator, just different editions. E.V. Rieu, R-I-E-U, so no idea really how to pronounce that name. And I find the cadences of this prose translation, well, not very inspiring in truth. So they prayed to King Zeus, the son of Cronos. They looked up into the broad sky and said, Father Zeus, you that rule from Mount Ida, most glorious and great. Grant Aias a triumphant victory. But if you love Hector too and wish him well, let neither man be beaten and the fight be drawn. So nothing special. However, this prose translation, also Penguin Classics by Martin Hammond, who also supplies the introduction, I do enjoy the cadences of this. But resourceful Odysseus scowled at him and said, Son of Atreus, what is this you have let slip the guard of your teeth? You catastrophe, you should have had some sorry army to command, and not have charge over us, men on whom it seems Zeus has imposed the working through of bitter wars, from youth right to our old age, until each one of us has perished. Yes, I prefer the cadences here. And this one of slipping the guard of the teeth, in the original Greek, there is this idea of the teeth as being barred. Shakespeare uses the same idea actually with a portcullis as the metaphor. So, prose or verse, you can take your pick. Then, to complement my translation of the Iliad that I found, there was also, right next to it, this translation of the Odyssey by Stanley Lombardo. I know nothing at all about this, but I'm prepared to get into it when time permits. Odysseus stared the man down and said, That's an ugly thing to say, stranger, and it makes you look like a reckless fool. The sad truth is that the gods don't give anyone all their gifts, whether it's looks, intelligence, or eloquence. One man might not have good looks, but the gods crown his words with beauty, and men look at him with delight. He speaks with unfaltering grace and sweet modesty, and stands out in any crowd. When he walks through town, men look upon him as a god. Another man might look like an immortal, but his words are not crowned with beauty. That's how it is with you. Your looks are outstanding. Not even a god could improve them, but your mind is crippled. That's from book 8. Right, lovely. And then my other translations of the Odyssey, a new verse translation by Albert Cook, I don't think this is very good. In truth, it just doesn't feel very poetic. It may as well be prose. Okay, so when she had scooped out beds in the sands of the sea, she sat waiting. We came up very close to her. She bedded us down in a row and threw a skin over each. There the ambush would have been most dreadful. The dire smell of the sea-nourished seals oppressed us dreadfully. Dreadfully. What an unfortunate word to end on there. And then again, Robert Fitzgerald is on the case, providing us with a translation of the Odyssey. I've read this 2 or 3 times and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I just saw one of my favourite chapters, my favourite books rather, come up there. Book 10, The Grace of the Witch. It's all about Odysseus' men being turned into swine. All right, and then we have another translation of the Odyssey, and this is by E.V. Ruin. So I have his translation of both of Homer's masterpieces. And finally, my favourite translation, Chapman's Homer. It's the most comprehensive, and I just love the stately quality of his prose, his verse rather. So, oh, mitigate thy mighty spirits. It fits not one that moves the hearts of all to live unmoved. And succour hates for loves. The gods themselves are flexible, whose virtues, honours, powers are more than thine. Yet they will bend their breasts as we bend ours. Perfumes, benign devotions, savours of offerings burned, and holy rites, the engines are with which their hearts are turned, by men that pray to them, whose faith their sins have falsified. Okay, so you rather have to sort of move backwards and forwards to really pass that passage there. Perhaps not the best one to read out, but I did choose it at random. But you get some idea of the kind of rhythm of Chapman's Homer. All right, leaving Homer behind, we can move on. And next we have some plays by Plautus. These are comedies based on the Greek New Comedy of Menander, is the best known of those. And Plautus wrote before Terence. He comes a generation after. And these are reworkings of the Greek plays, many of them lost. And so we have The Ghost, which was so-so, and then A $3 Day, which was very enjoyable. The best two are The Rope. That is a really well-formed shipwreck play. And Amphitryo. This is superb. It picks up on an incident to do with the birth of Hercules. Now, Jupiter came down and took a fancy to a mortal woman, Alcmena, and impregnated her along with a child from her husband. So they were effectively twins, half-brothers in utero, and he adopts the disguise in this play of Amphitryo, the master of the house. And so he arrives home and can't understand why he's hearing reports that he himself is currently in bed with his wife. Yes, so much comedy ensues. And what's notable is how the myth is changed in this book, because the birth of Hercules is pain-free, perhaps as a reward for Alcmena, who's very long-suffering in this play. There's just a flash of lightning and boom, Hercules and Amphitryo's child have been born, no pain whatsoever. But in Ovid's Metamorphoses, you get a different version. And in here, jealous Juno gets wind of the birth of Hercules and bribes the goddess of childbirth, Lucina, to delay the birth of Hercules, well, indefinitely. And so she goes down to attend and folds her arms and crosses her legs, and this action prevents the birth from occurring. So for 7 days and 7 nights, Alcmena is in agony until her smart maid notices what's going on with the folded arms and the crossed legs and just announces, wow, the baby's here. At which Lucina springs out of her chair, of course, unfolding her arms, uncrossing her legs, and that is the cue for Hercules to really be born. And as a reward for the maid's cunning, Lucina immediately transforms her into a weasel. Okay, so the play by Plautus greatly reworks the material that you'll find in Ovid. Very, very enjoyable, and I've ordered some more. I've already read his The Pot of Gold, which is also very amusing. Oh, one thing I should point out, there are lots of scenes in here where the characters threaten one another with a beating, with a thrashing, and I read more about Plautian comedy and the conventions of the Roman stage, and it seems that many of the actors were indeed slaves, and if the audience were not happy with the performance, the people who had arranged for them to perform would indeed have them thrashed. And so all these references to being whipped and thrashed, you know, there's an extra layer at work. Okay, now more from Rome. We have Petronius, the Satyricon, and Seneca. I'm not going to try and say this, but it's the apotheosis of a pumpkin, and it's a scurrilous piece of writing directed, I believe, at Claudius, and it focuses upon the details of his apotheosis as imagined by Seneca, and his last words, I can't quote them, it's so rude. And then, yeah, the apotheosis, oh dear, I can't say anymore. It's only 3 or 4 pages long, and actually the scholarly introduction that precedes it is so amusing in its own right, because it's adopting this high tone to discuss what is really some pure filth on the part of Seneca. So that was very enjoyable. I have a Folio Society edition of the Satyricon, which takes a radical approach to translation and turns it into a kind of William S. Burroughs affair, Burroughs having been greatly influenced by Petronius. But I think this will be a more faithful translation. Should we have a moment from the Satyricon? Down luxury's moor, Mars's walls now wilt, your palette pens peacocks in plumage of gilt. These Babylon birds are plumped under lock, with the giddy hen and the capon cock, that long-legged paragon, winged castanet, summer's lingering lease and winter's regret. Even the stork, poor wandering guest, is put in your pot and makes that his nest. Why are Indian pearls so dear in your sight, so your sluttish wife, draped in the diver's delight, may open her legs on her lover's divan? What use are green emeralds, glass ruin of man, or carbuncles from Carthage with fire in their flint, unless to let goodness gleam out in their glint? Is it right for a bride to be clad in a cloud, or wearing a wisp show off bare to the crowd? Oh, that is very, very good, isn't it? That is excellent. Obviously, these classical scholars have great fun translating this stuff. What's this? Pansy boys come out to play. You've been cropped the Delian way. Young or old, there's room for you, and room for roaming fingers too. Hips and bottoms waggle away. Pansy boys come out to play. No further comment on that. It is the equally filthy Satyricon. Great entertainment, and I strongly recommend Fellini's cinematic version. All right, moving on. Oh, just one more book from olden times. It is Polybius, the Histories. I read some of this from the library, but now I have my own copy to cherish. All right, what's on the cover? Military badges of the Roman legions. Oh yes, they're very interesting actually. Yeah, beautiful. Now the next purchase is perhaps the one I'm most thrilled with, and is Shakespeare once again. But, oh my goodness, it is the Riverside Shakespeare in hardback. A stupendous addition to my library. And here, look, it's just beautifully arranged on the page. And you have the notes there. And there are also numerous illustrations. I'll show you one of these if I can find an impressive one. Well, it's taken me longer than I might have thought. Okay, as promised, just seconds ago. So, yes, beautiful paper, wide margins, perfect for making notes, almost 2,000 pages of Shakespeare, all in one place. I do have all of the Shakespeare plays pretty much in separate editions, but yes, this will sit very well on my desk. And to give you an idea of how big this book is, here it is next to a Penguin paperback. Perhaps this is better. Okay, so enormous. And I also own the Riverside Chaucer. These are the 2 editions of the complete works which are recommended for scholars. And as you can see, the Riverside Chaucer is a very large book, but this is just the paperback, and the paper is just not so beautiful. You can't make the notes, you know, on this paper. It's just, no, not so great. And the margins are tiny. So when I have enough funds, I may invest in a hardback edition of the Riverside Chaucer. So I'm really, really thrilled to find this on my birthday. Okay, wonderful, wonderful discovery. All right, moving on. Okay, so early English novel, Samuel Richardson's Pamela, epistolary in form. My favourite epistolary novels, well, in the English tradition, it would be Tobias Smollett with his The Expedition of Humphrey Clinker, and in the French tradition, it is Laclau's Dangerous Liaisons. That is absolutely superb. Strongly recommend that. Then I did buy this new, actually. It's never going to appear in the used bookstores, it seems. My favourite writer of short stories, one of my favourite writers, period, is Heinrich von Kleist. And this is absolutely superb. Every story in here is magnificent. I'll just read you the titles. The Earthquake in Chile. It's like a 17-page opera. Superb. The Marquis of O concerns an immaculate conception, which turns out to have an all too rational, if improbable, explanation. Then we have my favourite von Kleist story, Michael Kohlhaas, 100 pages long, based on a true account of a man living in what is now Germany, who had a feud with a wealthy family over their confiscation of some of his horses, and he waged a terror campaign against them, which Martin Luther sought to bring to an end. It's absolutely superb. There's been a movie made of this in the last few years, The Beggar Woman of Locarno, just a few pages long, and then another superb offering, Saint Cecilia or the Power of Music, The Foundling and the Jewel. And then there's also The Betrothal in Santo Domingo. That is quite weak, actually, but The Foundling and the Jewel are also superb. This is a must-have. If you are just going to buy a single book this year, it should be von Kleist, the high point of German Romanticism. Well, if you're into literature, if you're studying to be a dentist, don't make this the only purchase of the year, book-wise. But if you're just into great literature and you've not read any of von Kleist's work, I strongly recommend it. Okay, so this was an impulse buy, used, although hasn't been read. The pages are still uncut. The Penguin Book of Japanese Short Stories. There is a contribution in here, non-fiction, I believe, by Haruki Murakami, and he writes the introduction. But what I found more interesting was, let me just find this. Oh yes, it's divided into sections, and there's one here on disasters, natural and man-made, and it has a story about the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923, and I covered this in a previous video on the anarchist Kaneko Fumiko, who suffered in the anti-Korean violence after that earthquake because she was in favor of Korean independence. And also Kurosawa, the great Japanese movie director, witnessed the aftermath of this earthquake, and he saw all the mutilated corpses of the victims of the violence too, and he writes about this very movingly in his autobiography and about what a formative experience it was. So we have just 4 pages, The Great Earthquake and General Kim, 500 pages or so, quite a comprehensive guide to the Japanese short story there. Next, we're off to France, Flaubert's Selected Letters. Let's see what's in here. Who's he writing to? It doesn't have a list of who he's writing to in the contents, but many of the letters are to Ernest Chevalier, and there's one later about his prospective marriage, and Flaubert is saying that all of the travel he's done around the world, he's in Constantinople at the time, all it's done is give him a few more white hairs and place lots of landscapes in his mind. Other than that, he is the same Flaubert he has always been. And there are quite a few letters here to this Louise Colette, and on the back we have a quote from her. In his letters, Gustave never speaks to me of anything except art or himself. Okay, so for completists only perhaps, but I'm going to enjoy reading Flaubert. Then I found this old book from the 50s, the novel in France, and it goes through the backbone of 19th century and 20th century French letters in terms of prose. Well, actually, it goes back further. I shouldn't have said that. It goes back to the first modern French novel. Let me get it right. Madame de Lafayette and the Princess of Cleves. And so I've actually read all of the books that he covers in the last 2 years or so. So it begins with her, then Laclos, Dangerous Liaisons, Benjamin Constance, Adolphe, which I strongly recommend. Then it moves on to Stendhal. So we have a section on the red and the black. Then Balzac, who he strongly criticizes, and I'm very much in agreement with his criticisms. I think Balzac is possibly the most deficient of these artists. Yes, I'm not terribly impressed by Balzac's work or his technique. And then we have Flaubert, the politics of a novelist, the man and the writer, and then style and language. And lastly, Proust, a new vision, the Noah's Ark, style and the place of Proust. So the writing is a little old-fashioned, but it's very good in terms of what it contributes to my appreciation of those writers. What's it called? The Novel in France by Tournelle. Then another one of my favorite French writers, it's Marguerite Duras, and I found this beautiful hardback edition of The North China Lover. I believe she wrote 3 fictions that deal with her relationship with this North China Lover. The most famous, of course, being the last one she wrote, The Lover, which I did a review of. And there's this, and there's another one. And I've only read a little bit of this, but I did really enjoy the beginning. It starts with them washing their house, and it's just got this way of setting it up, which is just perfect, I think. A house in the middle of a schoolyard. Everything is wide open, like a party. There are Strauss and Franz Lehar waltzes, but also Ramona and China Nights coming out the windows and doors. Water is running everywhere, inside and out. They're washing down the house. It gets a bath like this 2 or 3 times a year. Houseboy friends and neighborhood children have come to watch. They help out with pails full of water. They wash the floor tiles, the walls, the tables. They dance to the European music as they wash. They're laughing. They're singing. It's a party, lively, happy. The music, that's the mother. A French lady playing the piano in the next room. Among the dancers is a very young man, French, handsome. He dances with a very young girl, also French. They look alike. That's most likely Marguerite Duras herself and her older brother, with whom she had a very complex relationship. Next we have Cocteau, excellent writer and a great artist. And this is his diary of his cure. So he's trying to get over his opium addiction. And of course, you'll get the usual stuff in a book like this. Lots of stomachache and lots of headaches and sneezing. But among all the physical suffering, there are numerous interesting observations. And this quote, what I'm going to quote really stood out to me. Everything one achieves in life, even love, occurs in an express train racing towards death. To smoke opium is to get out of the train while it is still moving. It is to concern oneself with something other than life or death. Okay, what do we have here? Picasso used to say to me, sorry to keep you in suspense there. Picasso used to say to me, the smell of opium is the least stupid smell in the world. The only smell one can compare with it is that of a circus or a seaport. Raw opium. If you do not shut it up in a metal chest, but content yourself with a box, the black serpent will soon have crept out. Be warned. It hugs the walls, goes down the stairs and the floors, turns, crosses the hall and the courtyard, passes through the archway, and will soon coil itself round the policeman's neck. Excellent writing, isn't it? Do you have any of his pictures in here? Oh yes, I do like his drawings as well. There are some great ones in here. Oh, this is excellent, isn't it? Kind of looks like Julius Caesar there rather than Jean Cocteau. There he is with his candle burning bright. Okay. And another great French artist on intoxication, and this is a slim book. It's Baudelaire's Thoughts on Wine and Hashish. Forward, by Margaret Drabble. And here he starts off with the benefits of wine. A very famous man who was at the same time a great fool, two things which apparently go very well together, as I will doubtless have on more than one occasion the painful pleasure of demonstrating, has had the temerity, in a book on the delights of gastronomy, composed from the twofold point of view of hygiene and pleasure, to write the following under the article wine. The patriarch Noah is considered to be the inventor of wine. It is a liquor made from the fruit of the vine. And then nothing. That's all there is. However much you leaf through the volume, turn it this way and that, read it upside down, back to front, from right to left, and from left to right, you won't find anything else on wine in the Physiology of Taste, by the most illustrious and respected Brillat Savarin, the patriarch Noah, and it is a liquor. I can imagine how an inhabitant of the moon or some distant planet, travelling through our world and worn out by his long journeys, might desire to refresh his palate and warm up his stomach. He is eager to find out about the pleasures and customs of our earth. He has vaguely heard of delicious liquors with which the citizens of this globe procured for themselves as much courage and gaiety as they wanted. So as to be more sure of his choice, the inhabitant of the moon consults the oracle of taste, the celebrated and infallible Brillat Savarin, and there he finds, under the article wine, this invaluable piece of information. The patriarch Noah, and this liquor is made. That is bound to get his digestive juices flowing. That really explains things well. It is impossible, once you have read those words, not to have a clear and correct idea of all wines, their different qualities, their disadvantages, their effects on the stomach and the brain. Ah, dear friends, don't read Brillat Savarin. May God preserve those he loves from reading useless books. All right, so very entertaining writing by Baudelaire on the pleasures of wine and hashish, and then a biography, volume 1 of a 2-part biography of Proust by George D. Painter. And I like this quote on the blurb on the back. I never really read the blurb, but when I do these book hauls, I do occasionally sort of glance over them, but this is why I don't read them. Listen to this claim. One of the best biographies of any time. Okay, so Philip Toynbee is making that bold claim. Has he read even all of the biographies published in the same year as this one? I doubt it. Never mind all the biographies published over the centuries. What an absurd claim. Fancy putting one's name to that. One of the best biographies of any time. Try saying that when you're doing anything at all in life. You know, here we go. How's your tea, Jason? This must be one of the best cups of tea of any time. Okay, so get the idea? All right, yet another great French artist, and it is Artaud. And this is an Oxford book, has the little O there on the spine. Anytime you see that, you can buy the book. It will always be worth having, and indeed worth reading. And there's a self-portrait in here, in a letter that I wish to show you. Just shows the desperate state of Artaud in his final years. Here we are, very sad, here at the bottom. Okay, so there are quite a few images in this book. Here's a moment from Marat, Sade. Okay, so if you're not familiar with French history, okay, so we know who Sade is, but Marat is one of the people who participated in the French Revolution, and famously, there's a painting of him dead, stabbed in his bathtub. And so that is the scene there. What is this? Okay, this is the asylum where Artaud resided for a time between 1937 and 1946. 10 whole years in that kind of institution. Oh my goodness. All right, another French artist it is. Lautréamont, the Songs of Maldoror. And I really don't know much about his work, but it's very rich when you take a look at it. It's not really verse, it's prose. So let's try this. Arithmetic, algebra, geometry, imposing trinity, luminous triangle. He who has never known you is without sense. Steady on. He merits the ordeal of the most cruel tortures, for in his ignorant carelessness there is a blind contempt. But he who knows you and appreciates you, desires nothing more of this world's goods, is content with your magical joys, and, borne upon your sombre wings, desires nothing better than to ascend, lightly flying and describing an ascendant spiral towards the curved vault of the heavens, earth offers him nothing but illusion and moral phantasmagoria. Okay, well, he must have had a different math teacher to myself, because I've never really felt that way. Here, this section begins, "Oh, austere mathematics." Oh dear. I'm shaking just reading that. But it's quite beautiful, isn't it? Reading it out in that way. Yeah, definitely has a wonderful quality there. All right, so, yeah, two more French writers. And I found this yesterday. It's Diderot with the Discreet Jewels. I really know nothing about it, but some of the chapter titles are intriguing. The Banza Opera, Van Gogh's Vision. The Pontiff is talking to the Sultan. Okay, so it's set out like a play. "You heard all this, my lord, just as I hear you now," replies the Sultan. "And the woman? It seemed to me," added the speaker, "that she was half persuaded, and I presumed, by the distance between her heels, that she had begun to resign herself." The distance between her heels begun to resign herself? "I'm not sure what she said to the carpenter, but the carpenter answered her, 'Ah, yes, how true. Women are so difficult.' Having then taken his measurements a bit more calmly, master, Anaphor stretched his pale pink ribbon across a little folding ruler, and picking up a pencil, said to the woman, 'How do you want it?' I do not understand. Do you want the classic proportion or the modern one? Oh my goodness, what is going to happen to this woman?" All right, well, that is intriguing. Oh, it just mentioned geometry straight away afterwards. Okay, so Diderot, the Discreet Jewels. I read his Rameau's Nephew. I haven't read anything else by him. And then Bataille, The Absence of Myth. And what makes this interesting is Bataille's first-hand accounts of various major players in the Surrealist movement. So he meets Michael Laris. They have a good friendship, actually. And there's a sketch of Artaud as well. So if you're just into Surrealism and the kind of social dimension and their infighting, and you want to read about it kind of as it was happening, then this book is excellent. This copy is not in great condition, but the book itself, is nice. The painting looks like it's by Paul Klee, perhaps. All right, just a few more books to go. So we have Naked Masks, 5 plays by Luigi Pirandello. I love Pirandello. I've read many of his short stories, one of his novels, which was The Late Matteo Pascal. You can get that in NYRB books. And I read one play in here, his Henry IV. First act was terrible, but the second and third act of this 3-act tragedy, they were really entertaining. It concerns a wealthy 20th century Italian gentleman who is knocked off his horse at a pageant, and when he comes to, he believes that he is actually the character he was participating as in the pageant, who was King Henry IV of Germany. And to cater to his madness, his family and friends redecorate his house so it looks like a 12th century castle, and they dress him up in those robes, and they employ people to pretend to be from the 12th century. Most amusing. Of course, it's rather like Hamlet when one discovers that this gentleman actually is conning these people, and he's laughing at them because he knows full well that he's not King Henry IV, and he just can't believe how much they're prepared to cater to his every whim. And then he exacts a terrible revenge at the end of this play. It's really a great commentary on identity and madness. 60 pages or so. And the other plays in here now, 6 characters in search of an author. Well, everyone's heard of that. And each in his own way is the drama which first raised Pirandello to fame and public adulation. So, Naked Masks, 5 plays by Pirandello, strongly recommended. And then a novelist writing on the novel, Andre Brink. And this is really enjoyable. Very straightforward writing, but with some real intellectual heft. And what attracted me was he has chapter 2 all about my favourite recent read, Madame de Lafayette, the Princess of Cleves, the first modern French novel, and a highly psychological affair. and he writes about floating signifiers and such in there. It doesn't just focus on French literature. His trajectory, the path he traces, is rather different to mine and to the novel in France, which I previewed earlier. So we go from Don Quixote to Princess of Cleves, and then Daniel Defoe, Mole Flanders. Let me read you the other chapters, because this may interest some of my viewers. Yes, then we get Diderot. Yeah, so I've got Diderot there. It's Jack the Fatalist and his master, Jane Austen, Flaubert, George Eliot, Thomas Mann, Kafka, Alain Robbe-Grillet, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Margaret Atwood, Milan Kundera, A.S. Byatt, and finally Italo Calvino, If on a Winter's Night, a Traveller. So if you're really getting into literary studies and you want to read an excellent book about the novel throughout the centuries, focusing on major writers from various countries, then you might want to pick this up. Next, I have a short biography of Kafka, published by Reaction Books. I have a bunch of these. They're basically just the facts of the person's life with very little interpretation, but they're very useful when you're sort of putting together research papers. Okay, so Kafka. And then a classic from the world of comparative literature. A guy went off to Eastern Europe to have a look at how these oral poets put together their performances, and what he realized was the way they did it provided insights into the composition of the Iliad and the Odyssey. And so this is a really important book for comparative literature. So here he's commenting on the Iliad, and he also comments on, I think, on the Aeneid as well. Oh yeah, the Odyssey. Very famous. Albert B. Lord, The Singer of Tales. Then The Art for Art's Sake, which I'm really interested in. And this one traces it, I believe, over too long a period of time, because it deals with art for art's sake from 1790 to 1990. That is just too much of a span. But it's still a fascinating book, looking at how the movement emerged first in Germany with Kant's philosophy, and then garbled interpretations of Kant's philosophy made their way to France and to England, and became highly influential in producing what became known as art for art's sake. But there are also changes in the publishing industry, which pushed poets out of the mainstream of literary culture. And it was poets in opposition to these changes that decided, well, if no one wants to publish what we're writing, we'll write it for ourselves. We don't need to cater to an audience anymore. And so that gave birth to art for art's sake. It's a bit like taking your ball home, isn't it? Okay, so that is good, and it goes very well with this more focused study on end of the century Vienna. I'm not going to try and say the French. I always say it really, really badly, as every non-French person does. This has chapter on Kokoschka, on Klimt, on Ravel, and it just looks at the way in which the classical or neoclassical understanding was breaking down, and all of these different forms being sort of experimented with. It also covers architecture as well. Many, many pictures in this book, and it's really well written as well. Gustav Klimt there, very, very beautiful painting that is of Pallas Athena. And I noticed in the news yesterday that a Klimt painting has just sold for something like 230 million, the second most expensive painting ever sold. Great artist. Then I picked up a Henry James novel. I'm slowly accumulating all of them. I have 2 more on their way in the mail, and this one is The Ambassadors. I think I may have this somewhere else, but just in case. And finally, we have this, Herman Melville's The Confidence Man, in this Norton Critical Edition. I shall put it over there on the shelf next to Moby Dick and his collected shorter fiction. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes this birthday book haul. Thank you for watching, but now all that remains is for me to bid you farewell in time-honoured fashion. So, be safe, be strong, and I shall see you anon. Nanu nanu.